Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be making this lemon blueberry cake. If you'd like to see how this recipe is achieved, please stay tuned. So for this recipe, I'll be using blueberries, of course, and I'm also going to be using baking powder and baking soda. I'll be using evaporated milk for this recipe, and I'll be using a 2 lb bread pan for this recipe for baking. I'll also be using vanilla, sugar, freshly squeezed lemon juice, butter, lemon zest, plain flour, and I'll also be using eggs for this recipe. So the first thing I'll be doing for this recipe, I'm just going to be mixing all my dry ingredients together. So into a bowl I added my flour, I'm also adding the baking powder, and I'll also be adding the baking soda together, and I'm just going to give this a good mix to make sure all the dry ingredients are properly incorporated together before using it. So next you want to make sure you wash your blueberries. So I washed my blueberries and cleaned them, dried with a kitchen towel. So now I'm just adding about a tablespoon of flour to each, and then just giving it a good mix to make sure they are prepped and ready for baking. So next, into my baking pan, I'll be adding the room temperature butter. You want to make sure your butter is at room temperature. I'll also be adding my sugar, and I'll be using a hand mixer to mix this together. So I'm just going to be mixing it until the color has changed and is fluffy. If this is your first time visiting my channel, you're welcome. Please support me by subscribing to my channel, as I upload new recipes every week, and I'll be glad to have you in the Moga's Meals family. Thank you. So you want to keep mixing this together about 5 or 10 minutes. You'll notice the consistency is changing as you're mixing it, and the color of the butter becomes lighter. So while mixing, you also want to use your spatula to push down the butter and the sugar mixture, so each part of the butter and the sugar get properly mixed together and they look fluffy. You can see the color has changed, the butter has doubled in size by just mixing it. It's incorporating air into the consistency, and this is how you want the consistency to look like before adding the rest of the ingredients together. So next I'm going to be adding my eggs. So I'm just going to be adding them one at a time. You want to do this gently, not put all the eggs together. So I'm just adding it one at a time, and I'm giving it a good mix. So you just want to keep mixing it. When each egg is properly incorporated together with the mixture, then you add the next one, as you see as I'm doing. When you're done, you just add all the eggs and just mix it together, and this is looking good already. So I'm just going to be adding teaspoon of vanilla to this recipe. It gives you the very nice aroma when you're baking it. So while you're mixing, make sure to preheat your oven before putting the batter in the oven. So I just added my lemon zest. If you want it to be zesty, want it the taste to come over, you can put it at the end, but me, I don't really like the taste, so I just added it now. And now I'm adding a little bit of flour, not all the flour, so I'm just going to be adding it a little bit at a time, and I'm giving it a good mix. And I'll also leave a description of the ingredients I use and the measurements on the description box, so you guys can see the measurements I used. So I'm just adding flour again, and I'm still going to be mixing it. So like I said, you're just going to be putting this a little bit at a time, not all the flour into the batter. So just put a little bit at a time and give it a good mix. Make sure it's properly incorporated before adding the rest of the ingredients. So now I'm just adding my lemon juice. Like I said, I use freshly squeezed lemon juice. It gives a very nice taste. So just add the juice and give it a good mix, and I'm adding the remainder of the flour mixture into the batter, and I'm just going to give it a good mix. You can see how this looks. It looks good already. And if you're still watching and you've not subscribed to my channel, please support me by subscribing to my channel, as I upload new recipes every week, and I'll be glad to have you in the Moga's Meals family. Thank you. So now I'm just going to be adding my evaporated milk to the batter. I'm just adding it a little bit at a time, and I'm giving a good mix to make sure it's properly incorporated with the rest of the ingredients. And make sure the consistency is as light as you can see on this video. So next I'm just going to be adding my blueberry mix together with a little bit of flour in it, and I'm just going to give it a good mix. You can see the consistency of this batter. You can see how light it looks. This is how you want your consistency to be. You don't want it to be too thick, if this is going to come out tasting like bread. So you want it to be soft and moist, so you want it to be light like this consistency. So next I'm just going to be buttering my pan. So I added a little bit of butter, and I'm just gonna rub it all over the pan. So I'm doing this to make sure my pan is properly greased, and that way the baking process can be easy. So next I'm just gonna be applying my parchment paper. You can use baking paper, whatever paper you have available. So I'm just lining it on top of the butter, the grease in the pan. And now I'm just going to be pouring my butter into the pan. You can see how soft this looks. This looks good already. So I'm just going to pour it into the pan. You can see how good it looks. The blueberries are all looking good there. So I'm just gonna give it a final rub through to make sure the top part of the batter is smooth. You can see how good this looks. So I'm just gonna bake it at 350 degrees for about 45 to 50 minutes. You can see how nice this looks. So make sure you bake it for about 45 to 50 minutes and check it with the toothpick. Do the toothpick check to make sure it's properly cooked before bringing it out of the oven. Now this is how my blueberry cake looks like. You need to perceive how this cake smells. It smells so good. The aroma is everywhere in the kitchen. So I'm just going to transfer it to a plate. So now I'm just gonna cut the blueberry cake so you guys can see the inside of the cake. It looks good. You can see the berries are everywhere. They're in every bit of the cake, though they're not too much, so I recommend you use more blueberries than the ones I use. But trust me, this tastes good and it's yummy. You need to let the blueberries melt in your mouth. You can see the blueberries is properly portioned in the cake and it looks good. And now you can see how soft and moist this cake looks. Now I came in for a closer view to show you guys how it looks. It looks good. It is soft and yummy too. So I'm just gonna give it a final test and tell you guys how it tastes. And this cake tastes good. Thank you for watching.